Howdy, riders. Welcome back to an amazing episode of Ride Between the Wines. In this episode, we are going to be speaking about a whole lot of amazing women in the world of wine and food. So to start off with, we are going to have Melissa Stackhouse, who is a longtime great Sonoma winemaker. She's worked at a lot of amazing places. Such a pleasure to get to talk to her for a little while. In addition to talking about her and drinking some of her wines from Simi, we're going to talk about another iconic woman in the world of wine, which is Isabel Simi, who, well, just listen and hear how amazing she is. And then a little later in the episode, we're going to talk about another first generation Italian immigrant who really made her mark. And as we talk to her granddaughter, Carmella Roche, who is the third generation owner of the oldest restaurant in South Carolina, Villa Tronco. So very exciting there. And somewhere in the middle, we're going to get a little bit of Josh Taylor for his new segment we're now calling Life Behind the Bars. So it should be a lot of fun. Thank you for tuning in and pay a lot of attention because I'm so excited. I got a young man by the name of Will Lance agreed to make some amazing animation for this podcast. So no more staring at the stupid stick figures that I've been using for like 6 months. So check that out. Coming up next, buckle up and let's ride.
The world we live in is an amazing one, full of passion, wonderment, and of course, fine wine. This is the story of one man's journey to fully understand and appreciate that world. So kick the tires and light the fires. It's time to ride between the wines.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Ride Between the Wines. Very special guest this week, which is Melissa Stackhouse. Hey, Melissa.
Hi, how are you?
I am awesome, and I'm very excited to get to talk to you. You make fantastic wines. You've made fantastic wines in Sonoma for a long time now. The wines that we're going to talk about, the wines that we're drinking and talking about is Simi. But yeah, I know you have a long history in there, so I'm happy to have you. I think before we even get into Simi, I'd like to hear a little bit about how you got into wine and everything that brought you here.
Yeah, I've been making wine now for about 25 years, so a bit long in the tooth, which is crazy to think that it's been that long. But I grew up in Lansing, Michigan, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do for a very long time. I graduated from high school in 1984. I went straight to college. I thought when I went to college, I would discover what I wanted to do, and I didn't. I studied psychology and nursing, and then I dropped out after 3.5 years, much to my parents' complete angst. And a friend of mine had an internship in Bellingham, Washington, and since I wasn't doing anything at the time other than watching MTV all day long, I decided to move to Bellingham, Washington, and just be a roommate to her, and then just try to figure out what I wanted to do. So I did that, and that was back in 1990. And I ended up just doing a bunch of different things for about 4 years. I worked at the Bellingham Herald in classified advertising. I went to New Zealand and worked on organic farms for a while. Came back and I worked for Kinko's, and then I drove a motor coach in Alaska a summer season. And then I worked at a pottery studio. So for those 4 years, it was just a bunch of, I don't know, just jobs, fun jobs for sure. And then in 1994, I discovered that you could go to school to learn how to make wine. I was wine tasting on Lopez Island, one of the beautiful San Juan Islands there to the west of Bellingham, Seattle. And that to me was like an aha moment. It's like, oh my gosh, how cool to make wine. Like it ties in agriculture and creativity and art, and it just resonated with me, and it got me really excited. And it was really the first thing that got me excited for a very long time. And it was a quick transition, man. I picked up and moved to the Napa Valley pretty quickly and enrolled at UC Davis to study grape growing and winemaking, viticulture and enology. And I started there in 1995, I think, is when I started. Graduated in 98. So that's kind of the story that led me from Michigan, via Washington State to California. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned real quick that you were doing in New Zealand, that you were doing farming. Was that grape farming, or was that just farming in general?
No, I wasn't interested in wine at that time at all. I had actually enrolled in it's this really cool abroad thing called Willing Workers on Organic Farms.
Mm-hmm.
It's woofing is what it's called, and it's worldwide. You can go to many countries to do this, but you just sign up for a booklet of farmers throughout the country, and it's a way to travel through a country. You work for 4 hours a day, and then they give you room and board. Mm-hmm. So I was hitchhiking around New Zealand, so it was just an easy way for me to like get from one place to another and mingle with the locals. And then, there would be sometimes I would just stay at a backpackers or a youth hostel, and then I'd go to another town, and you just essentially call them up and say, hey, I'm here to work. And I did all sorts of fun stuff like dairy farming, cool. Market garden farming, but yeah, it's called woofing, and it's just a really awesome way to see the world,
Well, awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, sorry, I went back. So you graduate from UC Davis. First winery. How do you get to Sonoma? Because I think of you as Sonoma.
Yeah. So when I moved here, I always heard like, oh, those UC Davis students, they think they know how to make wine. They don't have any experience. And so it was really important for me to get some experience, some apprenticeship under my belt. So my first job was at Robert Mondavi Winery in 1995. And then from there, that was a harvest. Then from there, I did a harvest at Sterling Vineyards.
Okay.
And then I did a harvest at Joseph Phelps Winery. And then after that, I did a harvest at Peter Michael Winery. So I really started with a Bordeaux mindset, it was Cabernet. And then at the time as well, I was thinking about Syrah a little bit, because Syrah was really coming on the scene as being a potentially popular grape variety. Didn't really turn out that way. I don't know that it's super popular, but that led me to Australia. I went to McLaren Vale to do a harvest. And then I came back. I took my first assistant winemaker position at Alexander Valley Vineyards. So I was already sort of shifting from the Napa Valley to Sonoma. Even Peter Michael is in Nice Valley. That's like the region right between Napa and Sonoma. So I was already moving towards the coast. And a friend of mine, Kevin Hall, he still makes wine at Alexander Valley, actually. We went to school together. And so I thought this would be awesome, because then I can make wine with a friend.
Yeah.
And how cool would that be? Like, we could just be super collaborative, and it was great. It was like a great year and a half. But then it dawned on me, like, not only do I need the education, not only do I need the apprentice and the hands-on experience, but I actually need a mentor. Mm-hmm. Like, I need someone who's been doing this for a very long time. Somebody who I'm not so lateral to, but somebody who I can really learn from. And so that led me to La Crema.
Okay.
And that was in 2001. And so I came on as assistant winemaker at La Crema with Jeff Stewart, who is just awesome. He's like the bee's knees. And so he was just a really good mentor. He was the director of winemaking there. He remained there till 2003. Moved over to Buena Vista. He's actually since moved to Hartford Family Winery. Okay. So just a real giving person of information. He also was very good at delegating. So I was just hungry for challenge. And so I just felt like I had a lot of great challenges, but I still had the stability of a mentor there in case I, screwed something up, or I was like going in a wrong direction with a wine. So that was really good. So I always tell people, like, that's the hat trick, right? You got the education, you have the hands-on experience, and then you have a mentor, and not only just to like teach you about winemaking, but also like he is one of the most composed people I've ever met. And we had some really shitty harvests. I mean, like stressful harvests. And so to work with somebody who's like, you know what, we got this. It all works out in the end. So let's just make those decisions, and then it'll all work out in the end. And I just talked to him actually a couple weeks ago. I was joking about that. We were like, hope there's no statute of limitations to that, because so far it has always worked out in the end, even though there've been some, challenging vintages along the way.
Well, I'm sure the challenging vintages, maybe not while they're happening, but I mean, that's got to be one of your best opportunities to really show what you can do. I mean, I guess everybody says you can, I don't know if it's true, you can make great wine in a great vintage, but making great wine in a tough vintage is a different conversation.
Yeah, they do say that like as a winemaker, a good winemaker shows what they know how to do when they pull all the tools out in a vintage that's a little bit challenging. And for me, I think that was probably 2004 at La Crema. I'd been there for 10 years. I stayed from 01 to 2011, I think. I'm losing. And so 04 was, I always tell people it's the only vintage I've ever cried. Yeah. Like, I don't cry at work. That's just not how I am. But I had taken over as winemaking as Jeff moved on. It just happened to be a time when La Crema was really growing with Pinot Noir. Mm-hmm. It was a hot vintage. It was like 2 solid weeks of 105-degree Fahrenheit temperature. And, Pinot's thin-skinned, so it just doesn't last on a vine when it's that hot. I mean, we always talk about this awesome fog influence for Pinot Noir. Well, the fog was somewhere else. And it just wasn't around for a couple weeks. And it was right at the time of ripening that the Pinot was just shriveling on the vine. Because I was a new winemaker, I wanted to call it every pick perfect. Uh-huh. So I don't think I fully realized as being a new winemaker what was happening. What I should have done is recognize the heat and looked at the forecast and just brought it in. Like, because sometimes when you're working challenging vintages, there's a point where you just bring it. Mm-hmm. It's time to just bring it. We're not calling picks anymore. We need to move. And so I felt like I got us behind the 8 ball a little bit. And I remember just a day where I was like, the pressure was just like, oh. So I always say there's a tear in every bottle of the 2004 La Crema Pinot Noir.
I believe it. Well, it's got to be so much pressure. I mean, there's so many other jobs where, if you screw up, you fix it the next day. I mean, if you have a tough vintage, that's an entire year's worth of work, or several years, and
yeah. And, we're evaluated on the wines we make, right? We're evaluated on what that wine is like. And, often you don't get to really tell that story of what that vintage was like, and the drama and the weather events. It's really more about, you just need to make sure that wine is as good as it can possibly be in that vintage. So I think in the end, those wines turned out fine. It's just so stressful going through it, and I think sometimes people think in California, there's not that much vintage variation. There actually is a lot of vintage variation, I mean, after the 04 vintage and, 06, it was cool and rainy. And that was a challenge, less so for the Pinot, but for the Chardonnay. So, everyone's different, including this present one is also very different.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
Well, let's, while we're in Sonoma, just one more part of your history before you got where we are, which I know, Judy Jordan, sparkling wine. What was that like? Was that your first introduction to sparkling wine? And
Yeah, it was. I always kind of work on sort of a 5-year plan, and I had been at La Crema for 10 years. And one thing Jeff always said to us was, train your replacement, always have your replacement there. So he was big in succession planning. And Elizabeth Grant Douglas had started the same time that I did. And I mean, she was so eager and certainly ready to take over as winemaker there. So the J position came around, and I thought it would be cool to learn how to make sparkling, and then also help amplify their Pinot Noir program and their Chardonnay program from the Russian River Valley. So yeah, I moved from La Crema to J in 2011 to do that. And it was great. It helped to be in a little bit more rarefied air, bringing in that skill of sparkling winemaking. And the cool thing is that we had a consultant while I was there, a sparkling consultant, Claude Thibault, So it was really cool. Just, I mean, we're never not a student, but I felt like a complete student of sparkling production. And it was a really neat opportunity. And I spent 4 years there, and it was awesome. And then Judy sold the brand to Gallo in 2015, at which point I came here to Constellation. So.
And then the rest is history, I guess.
And the rest is history. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I do want to get into Isabel and the Simi a little bit. One thing that I didn't mention yet, but I want to mention Kim Martz, who was the Constellation manager, I don't know the name of her position, here in South Carolina. She actually was on my podcast. My podcast was originally audio only. Season 1 was audio only. It takes place in my car, hence the name Ride Between the Wines. Season 3 that we're in now obviously is COVID edition, so it's this. But in season 2, I did video and I still had people in the car with me. So Kim was actually in the car with me on the way to an event, and it was touching base on not all, but quite a lot of the amazing women who were involved with Constellation. So Genevieve was in there. You had a whole segment in there. So I'll tag it up here, but it's Kim Martz, and the episode is called Martz Madness because it happened in March, I think. But anyways, I want to make sure I gave Kim a shout out, and especially for giving me the hookup with you today. But that being said, let's talk about Simi, because historic, amazing winery. It might be the first winery my wife and I ever visited in California years ago. But yeah.
Yeah, it's a cool place for sure. Yeah, the stone cellars here in Healdsburg, it's right outside of Healdsburg, were built in 1890. The brand itself was founded in 1876, and it was founded by a couple Italian brothers, a couple guys from Tuscany, Pietro and Giuseppe Simi. And so they came here in 1890. And, you know, it's funny, I think when I'm in those stone cellars, it's just amazing because there are pictures around the winery of all sorts of happenings. And you know how that is when you're standing in a spot and you're looking at a photo of where you're standing, and it's like, wow, that's so amazing. That's like in the late 1800s or the early 1900s. So they put the winery together. They both passed away in 1904. They say of the flu, Giuseppe and Pietro are gone. And so Giuseppe's daughter, Isabel, who at the time was 18 years old, took over the winery. And they had definitely prepared her and developed her in a way that they felt like that would be, you know, that would be workable. And she sounds like a very strong, very tenacious, gritty woman from what
she would have to be.
From what I hear. And it's funny, like I was meeting with a grower the other day, and he said, yeah, my grandfather used to deliver fruit to Miss Hagen, and he was referring to Isabel because she had married. And and it was just like, wow, just to hear that thread of like a grower that we have right now who's been doing this for so long, that his grandfather delivered fruit here to this, you know, same winery, these stone cellars. So that was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
So lots of history here. And she had her challenges for sure, because in 1920, of course, Prohibition.
Right.
And she was, you know, she found ways to make wine. I guess there was some little loophole in that every cellar person could make some home wine. And so she actually calculated all of that up of all of her workers, and they continued to make wine all of those years of Prohibition. And, you know, initially they, you know, I don't think anyone thought Prohibition was going to last that long. It didn't end until 1933. So it was a very, very long time. So every year she made wine. So once Prohibition was repealed in 33, she was one of the only wineries that had wine to sell. Wow. So I can't recall how much she had, but she had a fair share that she just was ready to put on the market. I'm not sure what it tasted like, especially if it was like sitting around for that long, very developed.
Well, I think Americans were probably desperate at that point.
Oh, sure.
That probably helped.
She did some other cool things too. Like I think had the first retail shop, the first tasting room here in California, and she ended up taking this old redwood tank, I believe, and laying it on its side right out on the road, Healdsburg Avenue, and that was the tasting room.
That's awesome.
So not only did she keep the winery running, she did some super creative things as well with the redwood tank. She eventually sold it. I can't remember. Maybe it was in the 70s, early 70s. And then it moved to Constellation Brands thereafter. But we do keep her memory alive. And, even after her, I think Simi has a long history of women winemakers for sure after her. So we like to talk about her as being, super tenacious. I think there's some other women around that time as well. Like I read of this woman, Bertha Behringer, right around the same time, like these forces to be reckoned with, these sort of matriarchs of these brands. I can't imagine what it was like during that time, but it's cool.
I mean, even if you don't have the male hierarchy to deal with, the fact that any 18-year-old is thrust into a winery that then basically goes into prohibition. My goodness, you must have, grit is the word that you use. It's exactly what it is.
Yeah, it's a cool story. It's a really cool story.
All right, guys, welcome back to Right Between the Wines. This is my brand new segment that started last week with Josh Taylor. We are here at Columbia Craft, and we actually have a name for the segment now, which I love, thanks to Josh Osborne from Publico.
Yeah.
But welcome to Life Behind the Bars.
Yes, and the name Life Behind the Bars, in addition to being a great name, was officially endorsed by my second and most recent ex-wife. So I think that's good too.
That's I feel like that says a lot more than your first ex-wife, whom I don't know at all.
It does. She was awful.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for joining us again.
Yeah,
as I said, we're at Columbia Craft. If you've never been to Columbia Craft, we both have. Beer's delicious here. Awesome environment. You can kind of see behind him and behind me the big outdoors here. Food trucks pop in. Behind him, you can see all the different beers that change up very regularly and all delicious. So I guess let's just get started.
Yeah, well, real quick though, since they were kind enough to host us, I just wanted to give them a couple quick shout outs. One, they do music bingo on Wednesdays. They do recommend a reservation because they get pretty busy. Mondays is 25% off for service industry people and teachers. And then they've got a blood drive coming up on October 10th.
Yes, and if you honestly get the reservations, if you've never done the music bingo here, super fun. It does pack up quick. But yeah, I love doing that a lot. And I don't know anything about music, so it's always fun for me to come in. And there will be always the obscure round, and the rest of them Sheila takes care of because she's actually cultured and very different. But it's a lot of fun, so you guys should check it out. So that being said, I haven't seen you since last week.
I know.
How you doing?
Actually, one of the things I like the most about doing this segment is I get to see you weekly now.
This is a great
'Cause it's
excuse.
been like,
I love this.
We've been, not really slack. It's, old COVID and everything, but it's probably been 3 weeks previous to that, something like that.
Well, I also don't ever drink beer unless I'm around you.
Yeah,
So this is
a travesty, really.
Well, Scotch and wine have a pretty solid.
That's
But
fair.
yes, but I appreciate the opportunity to drink beer,
Yeah, especially good beer.
which this is. So, since I haven't seen you from last week, I know we had Labor Day. Was that the last holiday? No. What was the weekend you were working? Labor Day.
So we did it after Labor Day because
Right.
that's the people I was complaining about.
Well,
Educating about. Let's go with that.
educating. Well, that's what I was wondering. So this weekend, any
Well, I
anything
didn't
pop
bartend
up?
this past weekend. It was my weekend with my son. But I mean, I've
You got them for years.
I've been behind the bars long enough that I definitely have some stuff to build on. But one thing I wanted to bring up from last week is, we were talking about the whole people ordering domestic beers and repeatedly asking for more and more domestic beers. One of our viewers and a friend of mine pointed out that people might just not understand what a domestic beer was. And I've just been in the industry for so long that it's common sense to me.
I got to be honest. I was kind of there. Like, in my head, I know what is domestic beer. It's everything that's not what I guess would consider craft or micro.
Right.
But in your head, domestic means anything from
because
here.
We're at a clearly a domestic facility today drinking their beer. It's just an industry term for your big beers, your macros. But I think less people would understand what a macro was than a domestic, so that's why I go with that term. But yeah, so I don't know if there's another good term for it out there. It's just what it's always been called. 10 years ago we could have called them grocery store beers, but there's a great
Everything's
craft
in
selection,
grocery store,
so many grocery stores now. So that's I don't know, just a little thing to ponder.
Well, I would call it a lawn cutting beer, but I think that's offensive to all the great craft beers that you want to drink while you're cutting the
Yeah,
lawn.
there's plenty of great beers to drink out there. I mean, I drink Founders All Day IPA while I'm cutting my grass. Maybe.
I don't know.
Anyway.
We'll take suggestions.
Yes, exactly. Aside from that, I was also thinking about, instead of just, kind of picking on people, because I'm not a terrible human, or I try not to be a terrible human, we could perhaps talk about little signals that maybe everyone's not aware of. Like,
it's good.
If you order a drink and your bartender hands you a cup of ice water, it's not that they misunderstood you, it's that you're being cut off. You have over-imbibed, if you will.
Wow.
And when you're being cut off, just take it. Don't argue. I won't say never, but I've really rarely seen anyone win that argument.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I always had. There's two things that happen when you cut somebody off. You either cut somebody off and they throw a big hissy fit about it, or you cut somebody off and they're like, "Oh, it's cool, thanks."
Yeah.
And generally, the people who are like, "Ah, it's cool, thanks," were the people who maybe didn't need to be cut off. But if you have any argument at all, clearly you're the person who should be cut off to it. So.
I mean, there have actually been a couple times where someone was so gracious about being cut off that, like, I
You
was
just gave them a free shot?
Oh, I didn't. I was tempted to, but I didn't. But yeah, I mean, because there are definitely, it's the same with the same kind of people that throw the hissy fit when they're cut off, the same kind of people that get mad when you ask them for an ID.
Are clearly underage.
I mean,
people of age are happy.
I've had some people that I knew for a fact were of age, but some places just have that policy. Yeah. They're carding everyone, and grow up.
I can't imagine being offended by that. I'm way past that. I'm generally complimented when somebody card. It's so rare that it happens, but I'll take it.
When I'm being carded, I know for a fact it's just a store-wide policy. I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I mean, it's this.
Right.
Well, I think with COVID, though, I can't imagine. I would card damn near every person I saw with a mask. How do you possibly know?
Well, the thing with that is, though, you're not supposed to ask them to take off their mask. So carding people is kind of a moot point. They can show you any.
Because you can't really match up. I hadn't even considered that.
Nah. I mean, I've been carded, like I said, a lot of the grocery stores, a lot of gas stations card every single person. So I've been carded, and not a single one of them's asked me to lower my mask or anything. I mean, I think they can probably still see the beard poking out around the sides, but obviously there's a lot of people out there that don't have beards.
And you guys, get on it.
Yeah.
Man, I'm glad I'm not there anymore.
Me, at least I'm only part-time.
You're only part-time, so that doesn't quite count.
Exactly. I did my time.
Yeah. Oh, that's my whole thing. I do it.
I have earned, as we called it back in the day, my 5 points pedigree.
I like that. I think I probably have that too.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure hardworking Gary Bell, or G-Bell as we call him, is the one that coined that term.
Shout out to G-Bell.
Indeed.
I love me some G-Bell.
Yeah, fantastic, dude. Let me see, as far as like gripes go, I mean, kind of bouncing back, like it's the same sort of person that's going to complain about IDing, all those kinds of things. It's the kind of person that they don't come in and ask what's on special tonight, because we all know what's on special tonight. It's what's the cheapest thing you got? Because here's the thing, once you ask me what's the cheapest thing I have, I know you're not tipping me, or if you're tipping me, you're barely tipping
me.
Like, I'm going to tell you it's $1.75, and you're going to give me $2.
Well, that's interesting, because when I think of slinging beers, I feel like the price point between the cheapest thing and the most expensive thing can't be that big of a difference, right? Like,
no, I mean,
I never ask. I ask prices of cocktails. I don't ask price of a draft beer. I just assume it's going to be whatever I'm going to pay.
Well, yeah, but I mean, and a lot of places do list their prices. But for instance, at Keg Cowboy, we have your Founders All Day IPA for $3, and then some of our draft beers will sometimes be $12 to $14.
Okay. Yeah, I can see
clearly
that.
Those are your more special rare kegs, your imperial stouts, your sours, things of that nature. But yeah, I mean, that can be a price difference, and I get that. And I don't mind telling you what the price of something is.
Great beer is crazy, though.
Yeah,
I would never consider that isn't even an option out there. It's nice.
Yeah, but that's, don't ask me what the cheapest thing I have is. I don't mind telling you what's on special. That's a perfectly acceptable question. Also, and this is something that didn't happen to me, but happened to a good friend of mine who used to work at Delaney's. Don't come in and snap $2 at me and say, what can I get for $2?
I'm going to blank this out, but is that good friend's name Abby?
It is Abby. And I don't think she would actually care about her name being used.
That's funny.
But yeah, she actually just turned around and walked away. And walked
the right
in the
answer.
back, and the guy looked at me and said, "She just walked away?" I said, "Yeah." because she figured out you couldn't afford anything for sale in the
Yeah.
bar.
Maybe snap like a 50 or something. I don't. That's interesting.
Or even a 5.
Yeah. That's fun.
Easy there, Mr. Rockefeller. Your 50s.
Anyways, well, I guess that's we're gonna sign off for this week.
Sounds like a good one. Thanks again to Columbia Craft for letting us come hang out, drink some good beers, and we'll see y'all next time.
Sounds good. Well, I kind of want to get into grower relations, but I also want to drink the wine. And I think maybe if we taste it, we can talk a little bit about the importance. I mean, you mentioned it earlier, but the importance of growers and who you really who you dig with over the years.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Growers have always been a big part of what I do at La Crema and Jay, and certainly here at Simi. We have some really awesome estate vineyards, but we also source a fair share of fruit from our outside growers throughout Sonoma County. And because the Chardonnay is Sonoma County, we want to be able to do that. We're not going to be able to, to own vineyards all throughout this vast county. So it's really cool to have relationships with these growers. Not only myself, but we have a grower relations team that works with them, makes sure we all have the same objective. And it's super important in a very good vintage to have those relationships. Mm-hmm. And it can't be underestimated to have those relationships in a vintage that may be going south, right? Because it's a partnership and it's their livelihood. And so we need to respect that as we go through the rocky vintages as well. And we've got veteran grower reps who work with these growers, Joan and Doug. They've been doing this for a very, very long time. So those, I think, help us really with the supply chain of grapes and just to that point of partnership. Mm-hmm. Allows us to source grapefruit from pretty eclectic areas throughout all of Sonoma County, the Russian River Valley, Alexander Valley, Dry Creek, Sonoma Valley, Carneros, Southern Carneros, still in Sonoma County. Mm-hmm. So great families, the Duttons, the Sanchettis, San Giacomos, the Raffinellis. So growers that have been growers for Simi for a very, very long time. And then also growers that we've uncovered from sort of our past lives as well, like growers we've worked with at other places too, that we sort of bring on. So really good.
Do most of your growers, is their role almost entirely controlled up until they give you the grapes, or do you all say, we'd like you to farm like this? Is your relationship to the point where they know what you want as far as everything's concerned?
It depends on who it is. So if they're new growers, for sure, we'll intervene early on and talk through how we would like the fruit to be farmed. And then the growers who've been delivering fruit for a very long time, they know the level of precision farming that's required to be a Simi grower. But it's not like we're like, hey, we'll see you at harvest, and we don't talk to them. The grower reps are out frequently to just kind of see throughout the season cycle to ensure that the fruit's going to be healthy and the vines are healthy. We get through like our pruning season, and that'll be evaluated, and then we go through the bud break, and then we go through our frost season. So that's another time, that goes up to about Mother's Day, and so they're out there, and they're also out there securing more fruit too as we grow certain items. Simi, of course, is beginning a reserve tier of Russian River Valley and Sonoma Coast Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. So we've brought on some new growers in the Russian River Valley and the true Sonoma Coast to help fund those programs.
When do we see the first vintage of those released?
So the Russian River, we've produced a 2019 Russian River Pinot and Chardonnay and a Sonoma Coast Chardonnay, not a Sonoma Coast Pinot yet. Those were bottled in August. So I think I have a couple months of bottle age, and then they should be out.
Okay.
I think the intent is to have them out OND. So.
Okay, I'll look forward to it.
Yeah, I'm so excited about them. They're so yummy. They were just so fun to make.
Awesome. now you're to the landslide, the Alexander Valley stuff that we're going to taste here in a few minutes. That's not going anywhere.
That's not going anywhere, no. We've just sort of changed up the model a little bit. So we had an Alexander Valley Cab, and we've shifted that to Sonoma County.
Okay.
We'll still make an Alexander Valley Cabernet, just less of it, about 10,000 cases.
Okay.
And then we'll have the Landslide at about 10,000 cases as well. The three of them, the intent for all of the tiers is that you'll be able to taste the difference for sure. The Alexander Valley is going to be North Alexander Valley and a little bit of Mid Alexander Valley. Okay. The Landslide is South Alexander Valley, and it's the Landslide Vineyard. It's 170 acres, just sort of a vineyard on its own. It's got great terroir, great like geological story, super cool soils. You know, it's a little bit more of the like minerally rocky, some clay and loam, all Bordeaux varietals. There's a high part of the vineyard, there's a mid-range, and there's like a flat part of the vineyard. So super eclectic when we're trying to like create a palette of components to put the blend together. So those will be really different. It's going to be, the Landslide's more brooding, dark, concentrated. It's also not 100% Cabernet. This particular wine has 9% Malbec. It's got some Cab Franc, Petit Verdot, Merlot, and Tannat, which is awesome. Awesome grape variety. So lots of different layers, whereas the AV Cab, we're going to focus that's going to be more like Cabernet.
It's so interesting. I was talking to the winemakers, make sure I'm not getting my head wrong. It was Pine Ridge in Napa. And they were saying how they had a little hint of Tannat in the wine that we were tasting too, which was very interesting to me. What is the Tannat's purpose that it serves for you?
To me, it's like similar to the Petit Verdot. It just gives these beautiful aromatics to the wine. And then also like a rich fruit. You know, sometimes Cabernet can be almost stoic. And maybe a little like just savory, but it just plumps out the mid palate a little bit. I'm looking at it's 4% Petit Verdot and 2% Tannat. So, I mean, 6% of a blend, that's a pretty sizable amount of a blend. So just that aromatics and the rich fruit, I think, coming from those two varieties. It's intriguing. When you're tasting varieties blind, you get to that and it's like, that's super vexing. It's like, so like, just aromatic and fruity and just exotic in a way. That's cool. It's a neat component to roll in to the Landslide.
Well, I wanted to taste the Chardonnay first, but let's go do you want to go to the Landslide because you've been talking about it?
Yeah.
Let's go because you've made.
I don't have. I'm not tasting today.
But tasting
I know it's like 10:30 in the morning.
Oh, I always forget that.
You know why? I have to pick my daughter up from distance learning at 12:30. So
fair enough.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, I have a 9-year-old, and we've started the distance learning. So
that's what does distance learning mean?
Oh well, because of COVID. Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
so because of COVID, she's really on the screens all day long, homeschooling until the schools open again.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Are your schools open there? Or?
Well, I don't have kids. The university here has opened, but the COVID cases has shot back up. I wouldn't be surprised if by the time this airs, that'll be changed. I know my boss's kids are in virtual. I think all the kids are doing virtual from the houses.
Yeah, it's virtual. Yeah. So.
We'll see. But well, anyways, let's try the. So I have the 16 Simi Landslide. Which is that the breakdown that you were just reading?
Yeah. So we talked about the breakdown. Yeah, about 75% Cab, and then the Malbec, Cab Franc, Petit Verdot, Merlot, and the Tannat. It's like a 30-day maceration, so it really does stay on the skins for quite a while. Prior to that, it's cold soaked as well. So we keep all the lots separate so we can really make some interesting choices, I think, when we put the blend together. But I just love the broodingness of it. It's sort of a hedonistic wine. partly because it has those blenders in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool that it comes from one vineyard, right? I mean, just the most, interesting looking vineyard. It's, it's theorized that there's a massive landslide that even changed the course of the Russian River. So that's where the landslide name comes from. Some of the vines super old, and they are either considered for the reserve, which is in the tasting room, or the landslide wine itself, the blend itself. So
what is, you kind of went over the three parts, I guess, of Alexander Valley. What would you say kind of categorizing Alexander Valley as a whole is versus growing in Russian River, or the other more popular or well-known area of Sonoma?
Yeah, well, you can talk a little bit about, we can talk about the fog, right? Because the fog intrusion from the Pacific Ocean is really important to these areas. The Russian River Valley and the Sonoma coast is probably about maybe 15 to 17 miles as the crow flies from the Pacific Ocean. And there are a lot of little inlets that bring the fog in. So it's a perfect region for Pinot Noir and coastal Chardonnay. But right next to the Russian River is Dry Creek and Alexander Valley. So Alexander Valley still benefits from fog as well. And I think especially the South Alexander Valley, that fog can come in and it can mitigate the temperatures in the morning and then later in the evening. So we benefit from those warmer days, certainly warmer in the AV than the Russian River Valley, but we still benefit also from those cool evenings. Those cool evenings can help us preserve that acidity. So we still have the, sort of the beautiful ripeness, but we have the nice acidity as well. The soils, minerally rocky clay, loam in the Alexander Valley, pretty minimizing. They're not the most vigorous of soils, which is great for cab, because then you have small berries and you have more skin to pulp ratio, and you're going to have a nice tannic structure to the wines. Russian River Valley is totally different in soils, right? It's more of that gold ridge soil. It's very, it's almost like moon dust. It's like sand and moon dust. It's like when you're walking through it, it's like also not very vigorous of soils, but very, very different from the Alexander Valley. So I think, say, difference in soils, certainly fog influence. Okay. Topography as well, to a certain extent, I think, too. But they're extremely different areas. I don't know of a lot of Pinot Noir that is grown in the Alexander Valley. It's just too warm. Even right now, we're going through our predictable Labor Day heat spike. There's not many years where there's not a Labor Day heat spike. And you look at the difference between the temperatures in the Russian River Valley and the Alexander Valley, and it's really shocking. Even the diurnal shifts. Russian River Valley, maybe 50 degrees in the morning and heat wave up to 90. Whereas I think more Alexander Valley, it's going to be like 60, 65 in the morning, and we'll hit 100 and maybe 105 for a couple days around the Labor Day weekend.
Wow.
So it's going to give us a little kick in the pants to get some fruit in for sure. Yes, it's gotten our attention.
Well, so then Chardonnay, Simi. So I'm tasting the, which by the way, I love the new labels. I think that's new to this vintage, the 2018 vintage. But yeah, it's I don't know, it's a nice little dress up, whoever was in charge of that. But
yeah, I think marketing did some research, and they really found that what resonates with the consumer is more simplicity. Right? And just a label that's a little bit more Spartan, not a lot of stuff on it. And so that one it's got a nice font to it. It's really clean, elegant, and simple. Yeah. There are also good distinctions, I think, between the Sonoma County tier, the Reserve tier, totally different labels.
Yeah.
So that'll be, I think, helpful.
That's very helpful.
Yeah,
for us, especially.
Yeah, because that can be frustrating for sure when different tier labels are too similar.
Yeah.
So the 18 Sonoma County, pretty much from Alexander Valley, Russian River Valley, Sonoma Valley, barrel fermented. I think it's a lovely wine. I may adjust it a little bit as we go forward, because my background is more coastal Chardonnay. I'd like to give it a little bit more of a coastal edge to it, something that's a little bit more salivacious, a little bit more mouth-watering, with maybe a little bit cameo appearance of oak to it. But still 100% malolactic fermentation, just to kind of plump it up a little bit. But this one, to me, it has a little bit more of the baked apple pear, toasty oak, toasted nut, that roasted nut element to it, a certain amount of viscosity to it. But I'd like a little bit more acid.
I like it. No, it's definitely, I mean, I enjoy that in Chardonnay too, but yeah, there's definitely nothing flabby about it though. I mean, this is
good. Yeah.
Very crisp, and
yeah,
man, you hit the nail on the head with that, like, baked red apple. I mean, that just comes right out of the glass to you. This is delicious.
And that often comes from Chardonnay that's in a little bit more of a warmer area, right? Like it's the baked apple, baked pear, rather than the kind of the lemon that comes from really cooler areas, which is how we would endeavor to make the Sonoma Coast Chardonnay, that reserve Chardonnay, one that's a little bit more lemony and minerally, whereas our Russian River will be more Rubenesque. It'll be that little bit of baked apple pear and some sexy oak on it, some really beautiful oak choices going into that. That's just going to make it a little bit decadent, not sweet, but just, kind of a little bit more decadent. You will be able to distinguish those three Chardonnays from one another.
That's great. Well, making smaller appellations, single vineyards, like that all seems extremely cool, obviously, and we love that. But something like this seems like it must be so much fun to make when you're grabbing it from different areas and putting your salt and pepper on the batch. Is that a fun thing for you?
It is. It very much is. And that's like my job right now during harvest is I go out with the grower reps and the vineyard managers to call the picks. So I get to go to all these vineyards, and it's so much fun. In one day to be in the Alexander Valley, Russian River Valley, and then going down to Sonoma Valley. You can really, you kind of live that, those microclimates, because you're there in one day and you can really see, like, whoa, it's so foggy out. Like I was saying this morning, it's really foggy out, which is awesome because it's coming right before a heat wave. So lots of watering going on, and we've got that nice hydrating fog before we roll into the heat wave.
Right.
But yeah, all those regions are so different from one another. They really are. Yeah. And so it's really cool to be there and to see where all that fruit's coming from. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's lots of components to taste for sure that go into that wine, because we do try to keep all of those lots separately. I think a lot of wineries like to do that for a lot of reasons. One, it tells us a lot about what's going on in that vineyard. Mm-hmm. But back to the relationships we have with our growers, we have grower tastings, so the growers can taste the wine that comes from their vineyard. And then that kind of helps with that relationship, right? Like, yes, here are our objectives that we put out there, and did we achieve them? And yes, we did achieve them. Or did we fall short, and what do we need to do this next year? And so that way you make better and better wine, right? Like as you go forward, because you're identifying situations, issues that might need to be addressed.
Yeah. And this happens after it's fully vinified. Like this is the actual.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So this will usually happen like early springtime, like usually February, March. The wines have had time to age somewhat, but it's before they will be pulled out of barrel as well, because the Sonoma County will come out of barrel usually in around May or June, and it has to be prepared for bottling, it takes a lot longer with whites to prepare for bottling because we want them to be heat stable. We want them to be cold stable. And so it takes a little bit of time.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Well, I've picked your brain and I've had you a little longer, I think, than I told you. Maybe one more question, and then I'll let you go.
I'm open. I love answering questions.
Well, good. Well, you brought it back to the growers, obviously, and you were kind of listing off quite a few acclaimed growers earlier. But maybe just to pick one of them, like Dutton. You mentioned Steve Dutton. What does that fruit go in, and you know, where did that relationship come from? Because that one's an ear pricker for me, I think.
Yeah, I've worked with the Dutton family since my La Crema days, and they, you know, they've been in the industry for a very long time, and a lot of their fruit is West County, so Russian River Valley, Sebastopol area, Grayton area, so real cool climate regions, and a lot of those vineyards definitely with that sort of awesome gold-rich soil that I was talking about. So that fruit will go into Russian River Valley and Sonoma Coast, Chardonnay and Pinot first, and then would be considered for the county tier after that. So really super cool locations. This year we have a couple new ones that I've not tried, which I'm looking forward to. That's super exciting to go to vineyards and, you know, be excited about that fruit coming in. So
did you bring them over with you? You mentioned sometimes they do that, or was Simi already?
They were already, Constellation had already for certain brands worked with them. A little bit of their fruit, you know, I had made Naomi my first 4 years here with Constellation, so some of their fruit would also be considered for Naomi, and still is.
For the Pinot or the Chard?
What's that?
For the Pinot or for the Chard?
Mainly the Pinot. Yeah, mainly the Pinot. But as we go forward, both Pinot and Chardonnay for Simi from the Duttons. So
just because you brought up Naomi, and it's the only thing that I can think of that is sparkling. Do you have a hand in that with your sparkling background? Is that your baby?
Yeah. So so I helped produce the Naomi sparkling. Yeah.
Okay. I was just wondering. It's a delicious wine.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So yeah, we have the Brut, and then have you tried the Brut Rosé? Or we have a Brut Rosé as well. That
I don't know that I have.
Yeah. So the Brut Rosé was disgorged a couple months ago. It probably isn't out yet.
Okay.
We also have a Brut Rosé, which is super exciting because it's a little bit more on the Pinot side, whereas the Brut is a little bit more Chardonnay. So,
yeah. Well, that's nice. Well, the bubbly is definitely my favorite of the Naomi line. I don't mind saying that. So it's delicious. Well, all right. Well, golly, anything else I forgot to ask? I'm sure there's a million things. Did we cover the?
No, I mean, no. If any questions come up, just drop me an email and I can answer those for you. And
love it.
Yeah, I love being accessible. I love answering questions about winemaking and Simi. And so
for everybody at home, last week, I think it was the week before, there was a Friday huge Simi virtual experience with like everybody who sells Simi in the country, and there was pizza and it was fun. And Melissa, the very end of her thing was like, "Hey, I'm available. If you need anything, just let me know." And then like Monday morning, I was like, "So you said you were available." So thank you. That was great.
You bet. You have to put up with COVID hair. Sorry, I've not been for a long time, but it is what it is.
My COVID hair. I actually had hair before COVID. Not much, but I had hair before COVID.
Did you?
But well, anyways, thank you so much, Melissa. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, and thank you for thinking of us. Appreciate it, and thanks for all the support for Simi.
Oh, of course. So, welcome back to Ride Between the Wines, the segment that you just saw. So, actually, I'm going to say I'm here with Carmella, who is the owner of Villa Tronco, and very excited to have you here. If you've never been to Villa Tronco, This place is awesome. This is also the oldest restaurant in South Carolina, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But I didn't actually tell her what we were talking about today. I just sprung this on her. But the story that we were just talking about for the last 30 minutes before this is about a first-generation Italian woman in the early 1900s who kind of dug in and made it happen and has been well-known and iconic ever since. And that story and your grandmother's story are so similar. So we were talking about Isabella Simi, and you have sold Simi wine for at least as long as I've known you on the list. Right. And the particular wine the red that we just tried was the Landslide Cabernet, and you can definitely try that at Villa Tronco, so definitely do it when you come out. But the story of her and then your story, I was just like, well, we got to do Carmella for this. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So, delicious. Thank you. So this is my Take 5 segment, and so all it is I'm just going to shoot 5 questions at you, and you give it a go. Sound good?
Okay.
So let's start with question number 1. So question number 1, I call this category a pizza party. And so in addition to being the oldest restaurant in South Carolina, this is also the restaurant, and your grandmother is also the person responsible for bringing pizza to South Carolina, correct?
That is correct.
First of all, I want to ask you to tell me a little bit about the story of how that happened, but then my actual question will be, I want to know what your personal favorite pizza toppings are.
Well, that's going to be very easy because I just love the tomato and cheese. I'm just a plain, but that's my favorite, and I always have to have one of our Italian salads to top it off, and then a great glass of wine to go with it. But that's my all-time favorite.
Well, the idea of good Italian is simple. Good ingredients. Yeah, so that's exactly what it should be. That's great.
Right.
Now, give me a little bit of backstory. How is it that pizza ended up in South Carolina?
Okay. So my grandmother was actually in the fruit business before she started the restaurant. Then they moved around the corner from Main Street to Blanding, and right across the street was the Greyhound bus station. Little did she know that all those soldiers that were being shipped down to Columbia, most of those were Italian soldiers, and they were very homesick for their mother's spaghetti and meatballs and pizza. And when they found out that my grandmother was Italian, because at that time there were very few Italian families in Columbia, and when they found out that she was Italian, they said, oh, please, we were just homesick for the spaghetti and meatballs and pizza. So she, discontinued the fruit, and she started making spaghetti and meatballs and pizza, and that was really the only thing she had. So basically, that's how Villa Tronco was born, through the soldiers from Fort Jackson begging my grandmother to make some Italian food, which she was happy to do. And as time went on, she added other things on the menu, but they remained simple and fresh and just the best ingredients you could find around town. And that's what she gave them. That's what they wanted.
It's great. A story that's born out of a necessity for a little piece of home. I love that. That's fantastic. Yes. So, and we got a pizza. So come out, try the pizza here. It's delicious. But yeah, that's so cool to me as a huge pizza lover, obviously. Because and your grandmother, Sicily, is it Sicily, Southern Italian?
Yes,
okay,
yes,
just
Chef
making sure I
Lou,
had that right.
Chef Lou, yes. And she's the one that made it into the square. So she had, our pizza was square, which was very different at the time. And it was, we they hand rolled everything. And she had the pans custom made to be a square pizza, because that way you could get more pizzas in our oven than you could a round pizza. At that time, we were one of the first Italian restaurants in Columbia, and they sold a lot of pizzas. So they had to produce a lot, and so that's what she came up with. So that's why we have our square pizza, and it's very thin and crispy and very delicious.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Is your recipe for the dough exactly the same as the original?
Exactly the same.
I love that. That's fantastic. All right. Question number 2, I always ask, is the same question, and it's called story time. Although for you, I think this might be you're going to have a much wider range of things to pull from. So story time is, in your time in the restaurant, tell me one of your favorite stories. But for you, your time in the restaurant was from birth until now. It's always been. So your story can be something from recent or something from growing up and stealing dessert off I don't know. Tell me one of your favorite stories from this restaurant.
Oh gosh, there are so many. But but I think I must say that when my mother, who came in, Carmella Martin, who came in to the restaurant every day, we always would have a pizza before we left for lunch, and we would sit up front, in what we then called our little specialty shop, and a customer came by and just took a piece of pizza off our pizza pan and ate it. And Mom and I looked at each other and said, "Oh my gosh, well, okay, go ahead." But that was one of the cute stories.
That makes me think of the warm vibe of just like,
right.
We're just all sort of family. And
right.
Oh, that's a sweet story. I love that. Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you. All right, question number 3. This question's called Sports Ball Trivia. I'm going to ask you a trivia question. You ready for this?
I don't know.
Right.
Go ahead.
Do you happen to know, in 1947, who the first player to score 1,000 points for the USC basketball team was?
No, Mike. I love that question. Yes, that was my father, Henry Martin, who I'm so proud of, and we miss so much.
Yeah, I love that. He's like, all the history you think of in this restaurant, and then finding that out, the other connection for such an important part of the,
right.
Everything is so local and such an important part of the
right.
USC.
He was a great fan of the Gamecocks, and he was a legend. He was, and will always be.
And if you come and sit at the bar, there are newspaper clippings that you can see
right,
from
exactly.
the legend himself.
Yes.
See, you were worried. You knocked that one out. All right, question number 4. Ooh, this one might be tough. I call this question Le Donna Mobile. So, over the time where your mother passed the restaurant on to you, amongst other sort of changes that you and Joe made, I'm under the impression Opera Night is a huge nod to you all, something you brought in. And if you haven't been to an Opera Night, are Opera Nights still happening?
Not right now, but we certainly hope that in the near future they will. All the musicians are very eager to get back, as we are, but right now we are not able to do that. But in the near future, they are working on some things that we can see about if we can get the opera and the Broadway and the jazz back, because that was such a huge part of our business, and our customers loved it, and it just was a wonderful thing to come to.
And you have to reserve far in advance when they get back up. You have to make reservations because this sells out every Thursday, and it's a super fun experience to do. And so my actual question was going to be, what is your favorite performance or favorite song that has been sang in this restaurant at one of your opera or Broadway or jazz nights?
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's a hard one too, because there's so many. I mean, at Christmas we have the wonderful Christmas carols, and then we always do an Italian section of that. At one time, at one of the events, they did the song Carmella, which was very special for my mother and myself and my daughter. So that was very special.
Is Carmelina's name actually Carmella, and you say Lena because it's the cute? Oh, that's sweet. I love that. Yeah. Well, good. Definitely check these nights out. The world's coming back soon. You should come and enjoy it. But man, we got to 5 quick. I thought this was going to be a lot longer. So question number 5, and I think we've touched on a lot of this, but I always call it stick the landing, which means just, tell me something that we haven't already said about why Villa Tronco is such a special restaurant and what separates it from a lot of other restaurants out there.
Well, I think that because it's such a family-oriented restaurant, passed down through the generations, and Joe and I have stepped into those shoes, and I think we make our customers feel like they are part of our family, which they are. I mean, they've been coming here for generations, and it's just the way we are. I mean, it's just the Italian side of us, I guess, that are so warm, and the hospitality that we give our customers, I think it's appreciated, and they just come back to Villa Tronco, and we love that.
Well, I have to tell you, the family thing is a perfect tie, but I've been coming to Villa Tronco for a long time, well before we actually met. The first experience that I can remember in my head of coming into Villa Tronco was coming in, maybe with my wife, probably to come have dinner one night, and the host who took me to my table was little, like, Generation 5, like, he must have been, I don't know.
That had to be Trip.
Yeah, it was Trip. It had to be like 6 or 7. I don't know. He was really young, and he was just so cute. And then, like, during the meal, he would, like, come back and just, like, ask us how things were. And I was like, where are we? This is great.
He is a natural in the restaurant business, and so is Donovan. All my grandchildren love the restaurant, and so I hope that I'll be able to work a little bit longer so they can take it over.
Well, I didn't ask that question, but I was wondering what next generation is gonna pop over.
They seem the most excited about the business. They really do.
Well, it's so important that they do, and it's so cool to be able to say that the oldest restaurant in South Carolina is right here in Columbia, you know, and the amount of history here, like, just looking around, like, I'm not going to show the camera, but when people come in, look around, this place is just, I don't know, it's history, it's nice. You know what, I've asked all the questions, but now we're talking about, can you just tell me a little bit about, so it was a firehouse first?
Yes.
Is that what this came in?
Yes, this was a firehouse. The room that we're in now, the back dining room, is actually where the stables where the horses were kept. And if you can look around and you were able to see some of the brick, during the war when Sherman came through and the Columbia was actually on fire, and all the everything was burning and all that soot was just, you know, falling on the buildings. Well, this is a great example, because our brick in the back dining room, that just kind of stayed and attached to our brick. And you know, but we feel like that it gives us a lot of charm to our dining room.
Absolutely.
Because we are old and we're historic, and we love it.
Well, keep it up. Thank you so much. Come here to drink some of the Simi that Melissa was just talking about, and come here to try some of the delicious pizza and everything else. But thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
And there you have it. Thank you so much for joining me this week. What a great episode. So many people to thank here. Definitely you at home for watching. Please click subscribe on my face. Check out the other videos. Share this video. Tell your friends. Follow me on Facebook, Mike Wine Guy. Right Between the Wines. Instagram, Mike_Wine_Guy. All that good stuff. So, all the other people to thank. Let's start off with animation. Again, thank you, Will Lance. That thing turned out looking amazing. Thank you to Robert Gardner, who is a local jazz professor and an amazing jazz musician here, for allowing me to steal a little bit of his music. So the background music during the animation is Fabulous Friday, a clip of that, one of his songs from Soul of Confidence album. The voiceover is Reeves Rutledge, who just has an amazing voice and was happy enough to narrate for me. And let's move through. Melissa Stackhouse, thank you so much for spending the time with me. Your wines are delicious. I love talking to you. I'm so excited to try some of the new wines that you guys are working on that we were talking about. Carmella Roche from Villa Tronco, obviously, if you haven't eaten there, check it out. It's cool for so many different reasons, not just for the food and the great wine, but also you feel like you're walking into history a little bit. And great family and everything involved there. And join me next week, because we have an amazing episode next week, which is Catherine Hall of Catherine Hall. So you don't want to miss that. So until then, chin chin.